Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. Hello, and welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, your host, and I have with me today Mr. Joe Buckner. How are you,
Hello.
Joe?
I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining. And let me tell you guys a little bit about Joe. He is a man, a father, grandfather, son, and friend who is a boxing entrepreneur, executive coach, and founder of the Lotus Effect nonprofit. Joe doesn't trust anyone who has never been knocked down in life because adversity shows you who you really are. That is amazing, and I love that introduction. Would you like to add anything to that, or that says plenty right there?
No, I feel like you nailed it. That's what I was put on this earth to do, is remind people that they're worth fighting for. So you nailed it. Yeah.
Oh, I love the connotation too. So you have the fighting, which is literal sense, but then also in the very hypothetical sense as well, being knocked down by life. And you have quite the story, which is what attracted me to you. I am not exactly sure how we connected, maybe through Patrick, I'm thinking, but I'm not sure exactly. And when I saw your story, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get him on the podcast because you have a very compelling story. And what you've done to overcome has been really inspiring, to say the least. Do you want to kind of just jump right into it and tell us a little bit about your story and where you come from?
Yeah, I believe the story you're referring to is a journey I made back in the mid 2000s. To put it simply for people, I was a 4-time convicted drug felon who also ended up homeless. And in a matter of about 2 years, I was able to go from the fact that I was homeless, but I was never hopeless. I turned myself from a dope dealer into a hope dealer. And I've been able to transform from an ex-con into an icon. And now I use that story to reach back and help other people who are going through the same journey, to let them know that it's possible. Through my own lived experience, I can show them that it's possible. So I believe that's what you're talking about. In 2005, I was sentenced to 5 years in the Department of Corrections for being a street pharmacist, which is just a cute way of saying drug dealer. And that actually changed my life in a way that I never thought that something bad could. I guess if you want to call it bad, but it's what I needed, because I was definitely going down the wrong path. And I needed to become a different type of man so that I could serve not only myself, my family, my community in the way that I do now. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without that journey.
That is powerful. So, how important, this is kind of an off the wall question here, but how important do you think it is that as humans, we go through this journey of sometimes what looks like a takedown, but it ends up being a triumph, like the adversity? How important do you feel like that is for people to experience?
I don't believe you can have a whole human experience without going through some adversity. In my film, the last line of the film, I said, I don't trust anyone who's never been punched in the face. Because when you've been punched in the face, you learn something about yourself. You're either the type of person that's going to cut and run, or the type of person who's going to stand up and fight. And I'm the type of person that fights. So to translate that, I don't physically mean like you have to have been punched in the face, but life is going to take a shot at you at some point. It's going to. It's just how the thing works. Nobody gets out of it unscathed. So adversity doesn't build character, it reveals character. That's why you have to go through it, because you got to learn what you're made out of. And the other thing it'll teach you is like, oh, I'm an overcomer. I'm a fighter. I can get through hard things because I have a feeling that there's not just going to be one. If you live long enough, you're going to have plenty of them. So you have to know that you're capable of fighting through it. So I believe it's a vital part of life, a necessary part of life, because in struggle is where you find your purpose.
And do you feel like you have found your purpose in life?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
My purpose is simple. I mean, I was gifted my journey so that I could be a blessing to other people. I have to be a living, breathing example that you could have been homeless, you could have been sent to prison, you could have been born 30 cents away from a quarter, and you can still rise up and become something phenomenal in this world because you have the DNA of a winner in you already. So, yeah, I do have my purpose and I live it every day, and I'm grateful for that.
That's so good. So let's back up a little bit. I want to ask you, when growing up, have you ever reflected back and asked yourself kind of what has put you in the situation to make the decisions that you made where you ended up there? And what did you say that was 2000? Was it 2005 you
2005,
said?
yeah,
Hmm.
was when I got sent away. The actual crime was committed in 2002, interestingly enough. But, statute of limitations and all that. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I didn't want to be poor anymore. I mean, to make it plain and simple, I did not want to be poor. And this is a typical story, single mother household, but we were broke. Again, we were 30 cents away from a quarter. There was always too much month at the end of the money. And I didn't want to be poor anymore. So I found a way to not be poor. I found a way to make money fast. And I was chasing that ever elusive American dream, right? The house, two kids, car. I just didn't know any other way to get there. Because I can promise you at that age, fresh out of college, if someone would have come to me and said, you can make $1 million as a plumber, I'd probably be a plumber today or a roofer but I can't aspire to something I've never seen. And I'd never seen any of that. All I knew was people live, they struggle, they don't have money, they're broke. And so I was just trying to find my way out of all that. And I thought I did. And obviously the retirement plan for drug dealers isn't great. So I ended up where I ended up. But the decision was simply one of not wanting to be poor anymore. Because I don't think that money is the root of all evil, like a lot of people believe. I believe that poverty is the root of all evil. Yeah, I was
That's
just trying
good.
not to be poor.
That's profound. And I think there is a lot of self-limiting mindsets and thoughts around money. But it's interesting that this is kind of, it boils, like, your decision making kind of boiled down to that one thing, which was, I don't want to be poor anymore. How were you introduced to this? Was it something you just saw around with, family members or friends, or were you introduced to this lifestyle?
I mean, yeah, I'd always seen people that did that. Like I just come from that part of my town. And, you know, when you're poor, if someone has a car, they're rich, right? If they have a nice jacket, they're rich. So they had things. But I still went to college. I played football. Like I was just a regular Joe. Um, and then the way I got into it though was a guy at my work said what now at 48 I realize is one of the most racist things anyone's ever said to me, but at the time it just didn't register because I was at work. And he says, "Hey Joe, you're black. Do you know where I can get some drugs?" And that's how I became a drug dealer. I helped him find some because I had no idea where to get them because I was a pretty square guy. Don't really drink like that. I don't go out and party like that. So, but I know people. I've always been a super connector. So I know people. And I called the guy that I knew and he set him up. And on my lunch break, I made $100 in 30 minutes. And I just thought, the math ain't mathing for me to keep doing this job if I can spend 30 minutes driving to and from and make $100. Because I got a lot of 30-minute blocks during my day. So it took me probably about a month before I didn't work there anymore. And I was full-fledged in this other thing and I was making money hand over fist.
Mm. So you said something that I think is funny in a sense that, and I've often wondered this, like I never sold drugs myself, but I've often wondered this specifically about drug dealers, is that if they took the same energy and application to do this and applied this to entrepreneurship, they could make a
Hmm.
really good, a lot of times they have a lot of amazing qualities that an entrepreneur seeks in
Yep.
drug dealing. And you said something that made me think of this when you said that the guy has a problem and you have a solution. So
Yep.
you meet his need to solve his problem, which is what we do in entrepreneurship and marketing. And um, tell me a little bit about what are your thoughts about that? Have you ever considered the fact that there's a lot of correlation between drug dealers
Yeah.
and entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Drug dealers are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're just in the legal business. Um, I think about it constantly, and moreover, it's one of the reasons why when I got out of prison, I got accepted for every job I applied for. A lot of people struggle with that, but it's because God has gifted me with the ability to communicate with words. So I wrote this letter, and this will speak to exactly what you're saying. I wrote a letter that I took with me to every job that I applied for. The first paragraph of the letter simply said, I was just released from the Department of Corrections. I am a first-time nonviolent offender. I've never physically harmed anyone in my life. Here's what my crime was: possession with intent to distribute Schedule II controlled substance. I said, but that doesn't mean anything. If you stop here, you're going to miss an opportunity. Here are the skills I learned in my business. I learned inventory control, because if my inventory wasn't right, it was a lot worse than getting fired from a job. I learned money management, because if my money wasn't right and I didn't pay on time, it was going to be a lot worse than getting fired from a job. I had a team of 15 people. I learned how to manage them. Some of them were high performers, most of them were not. So I know how to manage people. In the last paragraph, I said, these are also the skills that would make me a great fit for your company, because I already know how to do this business thing. I'm not going to need a whole lot of training. And people loved it because I took what was a negative, but I said, but here's what I learned from that. Here's what I actually already naturally possess, and I will be an asset for you. So to your point, yeah. Now, we also have to acknowledge that we live in a country that has a big drug problem. And I think it's something like 90 some percent of people who go to jail or prison for selling drugs were actually just selling drugs to feed a habit. They are drug addicts. They're just trying to get their next fix. And so that's how they support it. I knew from the beginning I was going to make a business. I knew from the beginning because, like I said, I'd been watching these other guys. I didn't want people calling me at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning to bring me $50 or $100. So I went to the guys I'd always been watching. I said, hey, I started a new business. Let's talk. How much do you buy this and this for? Large quantities. Oh, I buy for this much. Great. If I can beat each of those prices by $1,000, would you start buying from me? 100%. Great. Would you do that today? I'll buy 2 of them today. Boom. So I will take my little, I made $2,500 today. That guy's going to go home. He's going to make a lot more money than me because he's going to break it up and do what he got to do. I don't care about that. I don't care that you're making more than me. I want to run a business. And so that's what I did. So yeah, I believe that drug dealers, criminals, period, have all the skill set, the good ones, the big ones, to be great at business. It's just they're in the wrong business.
Yeah, I've often wondered this too, but I've never heard it put quite like that. And I'll be honest, you just kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I hope that whoever listens to this too will see that as well. If they've ever, my goal is to obviously get these episodes out to the people that need to hear them. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I hope that people catch what I just caught because that was awesome. So tell me a little bit about, you have a very positive mindset. And I love speaking to you, even though, we've been on here 15 minutes and I catch this you just exude this positivity, which I love. Um, how did you get so positive? Was this something that it was like overnight, or have you always been a positive person, or how did this happen?
It was not always in me. I grew up with a lot of trauma, a lot of negativity. So I think I carried that for a long time. And I've gotten to this place through a lot of therapy. I'm very open about that. I've been in a lot of therapy. Um, I've taken a lot of classes and courses on just how to be a better human, how to be better in relationships. I read consistently, and it's also an everyday struggle. I just like a lot of people, I struggle with my mental health at times. So it's not all the time thing, but I'd say it's probably a 90% of the time thing. But I can say that what has helped me to develop this sort of like positive mindset, because I'm not a toxically positive person. If something sucks, it sucks. I'm gonna say that. I'm like, that sucks. That's hard. One of my best friends died 4 weeks ago, and that was hard. And I'm not positive about that. I don't feel good about that. It was unexpected. But when I'm going through tough things, I always found that me staying positive was going to get me further and out of it quicker than me being negative about it. Do you mind if I give you an example?
Oh no, please do.
So when I was homeless, just through an unfortunate breakup, we were living together. I ended up homeless for 7 months. Not awesome, but I got this. Every so often, I would scrape enough money together to stay at the Motel 6, checking with my kids, checking with my best friends. Hey, where are you staying tonight? I'd say, well, I'm going to be at the mansion. I thought you were going to be at the Motel 6. Right. But it has 48 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and it has a Waffle House. So that sounds like a mansion to me, right? So that little bit of positivity, it's like I'm tricking myself, but people don't realize everything that happens in here and comes out of here is real. And your body's listening. So if every day I wake up and today sucks, it's going to be horrible. Guess what today's going to be? You're going to stub your toe. You're going to hit every red light. There's going to be a crash on your way to work. Everything's going down. If you just wake up every day like, I'm grateful, I'm excited to see what today has for me, and that didn't work out for me, there's a reason that didn't work out. I'm going to keep it pushing, right? That day
Yeah.
moves different. So I credit my therapist, Dr. Marv, for a lot of this. I do put a lot of credit on the 3 years I was a Lululemon ambassador, because I got to do a lot of personal development work with them. And then I'm going to give myself some credit. I've done a lot of self work. I do it constantly, and I'm never going to stop, because I want to be the greatest man that I can possibly be. And I can't be that if I'm negative all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I love that, and I think I've often considered this thing of, what we focus on expands. You've probably heard this
Mm,
before. And it goes right along with that. It's like if I'm focused on being down on myself or being negative, I'm going to notice all the negative things. If I focus
mhm.
on being positive, sometimes you don't even notice those things because you're not
Yeah.
focusing on those things. So I think it's very important to be have this powerful, positive mindset.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think it, in my experience, it's gone across the board. So I come out of the fitness industry I was 19 years old. I was super skinny, and got into weightlifting so that I could gain weight, and just fell in love with fitness. And then later, as I get into business, it's so funny to me how you see these corresponding mindsets. It's the same mindset. It's just applying it to a different thing. And then you start to see this being applied to all these areas of life where it's
Yeah.
like, it's the principles are the same, but being able
Yeah.
to apply this in all the different areas is powerful.
Yeah. What type
Uh,
of business do you run, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah. So I started doing a photography business, kind of started it as a hobby, and then it turned into a business. And now it's expanded
Nice.
into photography is where I first got the vision for even this podcast, because I was hearing people share stories of of overcoming adversity, triumph. And I felt like people needed a place to share these stories. And as a photographer, I would get to spend an hour or 2 hours with this person and they would share these things with me. And I'm like, what do I post this on social media? And didn't know if they were comfortable sharing some of these things. And so it was just like, I just felt like there was a need where stories are impactful. And I felt like it wasn't fair that I was getting to hear these amazing stories of triumph. I was being inspired by it, but how many other people could also be inspired? So
Yeah.
it took years to shift and mold into what it is now, which is, we run the podcast. I do these transformation through trauma sessions, which is like a very healing session using photography as an expression of the hurt, the trauma, and then the triumph. So then you got these powerful images that kind of show both sides of the hurt and then the overcoming. And I believe a lot in visualization, and I'm sure you do too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I do believe that when you can put a visual in front of someone, and people would stand in front of my camera and say, they would look at their photos, specifically athletes, fitness people, and they would say, "Oh my God, I didn't know I looked like that. That's me." And I'm like, yes. And I didn't even Photoshop anything. Like, this is you. This is all done by lighting and posing and all the things that go into photography. But now they have a visual of this is me. This is really me. And I felt like that was powerful, being able to show someone a visual of what they overcame, the hurt and the pain, like, hey, I never want to go back there. And then being able to show someone this triumphant version of themselves, where they're like,
Mm-hmm.
that's really me. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about visualization, or even about the example I just gave? I would love to know your input.
My friend John used to say, see it, believe it, achieve it. But you got to see it first, right? If you can see it, then eventually you'll believe it. And if you can believe it and see it, you'll achieve it. So I believe that. I believe you have to see yourself, walking out of the door of your hut in Bora Bora. I believe you have to see yourself standing on stage, first place, running a successful business and helping people. All the things that we want to do, you have to actually see it, because if you don't see it, then it'll never actually become real, right? It's just pie in the sky. And if you don't see it, that means you actually don't believe it. So what I loved about your story about the photos, it reminds me of that social media experiment they did a few years ago, where they had two people across from each other in an easel. And so, like, if it was you and I, and they would say, okay, Joe, draw a picture of Amber. Amber, you draw a picture of Amber. And what they found is when people drew pictures of themselves, they'd have like all their flaws and things they didn't, like about themselves. And the other person's picture was always exponentially more beautiful and flattering, because they were seeing, themselves. They got to see themselves through someone else's eyes. So the cool thing about your photo story is that sometimes the ugliest place in the world is a space between our own two ears. No matter what level we've gotten to in life and fitness, and heck, I do it to myself all the time. I'm like, oh man, like, if I could just like lose 7 more pounds right here, like nothing in my life is actually going to change, but it's like this little thing that we do, right? So what I love is you're showing people like, well, here's what I see, here's what my eye sees, and they get to see who they really are, and hopefully at some point they will believe it, because seeing is one thing and then believing it is another. So yeah, I believe in visualization. I'm into all this stuff.
Yeah,
All the
I
stuff I
figured.
really am.
Already
So
figured.
yeah,
um, I
yeah.
heard I have a mentor, and just recently he was sharing this, and I thought it has literally like changed my views on this whole thing of visualization. So he had me like close my eyes and do this activity where you walk into like this place, and this place is like the place that you want to work or be in 5 years from now. And you walk into this place, and you walk up to this office or wherever it is, whatever you aspire to be, you walk into this door and there sits yourself 5 years from now. And you
Mm,
ask yourself, hey, if I want to do XYZ, he's specifically a business mentor. So he's talking about business. If I want to be a millionaire in 5 years, what are the things that I need to do? And he said, he had someone do this with him. He said, it's always the things that you don't want to hear. That's what you're going to tell yourself. But if
yeah.
you're honest with yourself, like you really do this, and I've tried this exercise a couple of times in meditation, just going, and especially when I have questions, because I do believe that we have what we need inside of us. He equips us with everything we need. And sometimes it has to be tailored and polished and shaped up a little bit, but we have those things inside of us. And I believe for years I struggled with trusting my own intuition, my own self. And
Hmm.
now being able to grow into this person of like, okay, I can trust myself. That visualization activity has been revolutionary to me, because now I'm going in and asking myself, hey, look, you're a millionaire, or you're this, or you're that, or you're super fit, or whatever. I want to be
Hmm.
this in 5 years. So how can I get there? And you're given the answers. It's
Yeah.
what you do with the answers is the question.
Yeah. The application of that knowledge, right?
Yeah, or the execution of it. That's the
Yeah.
hard part. So
Yeah.
you had this journey
Yep.
of self-growth. You did therapy. You went on this whole journey of self-growth. Like, at what point did you kind of know you had become a different person? You were no longer that person. Or did you have a defining time?
I believe that those moments are constantly happening, whether it's how I react to someone who has wronged me, whether it's being adult enough to have the ability to apologize in the moment if my tone was off, or maybe I didn't reply from my highest self because I'm a little bit stressed or I'm hungry, but being able to acknowledge that, I, I would say probably during COVID is when I became really, really hyper aware that, okay, I'm changing because I'm making decisions that don't just benefit me. I'm making decisions, whether it's in a relationship with my family, with my business. I'm making decisions that aren't just about like what makes Joe feel good. And one of those was ending a relationship because we weren't going in the same direction. And it was being able to have that really mature conversation like, hey, what does 2 years from now look like? And she shared hers and I shared mine, and it didn't look the same. And old me would have been like, well, I like this girl and we're in a relationship. So we're just going to thug it out. And who knows, right? But evolved me, so, well, we're both in our 40s. I don't see any reason for us to continue doing this if we're not wanting the same things. So it would be best for me to remove myself so that you can go find what you're looking for. And maybe I'll find what I'm looking for too. But that was one of the big moments for me, because young me was like, relationship was about like having the person. It wasn't about what was best for the person. And as you get older, I think you realize, like, if you really, really love someone, something, all you want is what's best for them, even if that means it's not you. And that's not easy. It doesn't feel good, but it's mature, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And, I agree with you 100% when it comes to, I call it alignment. It's like, and it goes with any relationship, not just romantic relationships, but friendships or work relationships or whatever. It's like, as long as we're aligned, like, let's keep doing what we're doing. But at what point, we all have different callings and different destinies and different things that we're doing in this life. And if at some point we no longer align, then maybe we need to embark on your journey and I'll embark on mine, and no hard feelings. I think a
Yeah,
lot of times people get caught up in taking things personal.
right.
But man, the world would be a much more beautiful place if we didn't take things so personal and we just looked at things like, hey, we just don't align. We'll still be
Yeah.
friends, you know, from a
Yeah.
distance though.
Yeah. From a distance. From a distance. Yeah.
Hmm.
It was that. It was, I started paying attention to my credit. I was like, oh, I think this is important. I should pay attention to this. um, I stopped really, really stressing out about what other people thought about me. I started to really learn how to love my children and even ask them, one year I said, please let me know if I'm loving you the way that you want to be loved. And if I'm not, how can I be better? And those type of questions you just don't ask when you're young and you're immature. You just love people the way you want to be loved, I think. So, or the way that if you're a parent, the way that you were parented. And so learning to ask those questions and understanding this child needs this child needs this. The little one needs, well, she's 11. She don't want nothing to do with me. So it's so like just understanding the different little nuances. And I had one recently just to stay on this subject with my son. Love my son dearly. I had sent him a Snapchat and I was trying to be motivational. Hey son, I love you so much. I'm so proud of everything you do. Like I was high energy, high energy. And he responded to me in the most courageous way. And he said, Dad, that doesn't motivate me. Growing up, you were the disciplinarian. So when I hear you yell, it scares me. It doesn't motivate me. And it makes me not know how to answer because it makes me think I need to come up with an answer that's not going to get me in trouble. Now, my son's 23. Like, he ain't going to get in trouble for saying nothing. But him sharing that, old me would have gotten in his feelings and argued. But evolved me, therapy me, hopefully growing up man me, it was like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'll do better. I won't send you any like overly hype, yelling motivational videos. Like, let me know how I can best support you. And I'm not perfect with it. I still sometimes try to overdo the dad thing, but I'm learning. And I think that's the other part of it is when you're willing to constantly be learning and change. And if the criticism fits, fix it. That's when I think you realize like, oh, I'm becoming different. I'm becoming a better version of who I already was.
Mm, that's so good. That's really good, and I agree with you 100%. And I do think that that's a sign of maturity. But I also think too that this is impressive as well. That your son could voice those feelings
Hmm.
is huge as well, because
Yeah.
I do feel like in the culture that we live in today, it is really hard to get people to, one, understand their feelings, and two, be able to voice them. So when something triggers us, like you sending him a motivational video kind of triggered him to like this disciplinary father, even though it's not your intent. But when we experience these triggers, we it's hard for us to sometimes know like where that came from. And then if we know where that comes from, then having the courage to speak out and say, that didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. It was a really proud dad moment, to see your boy growing up into a man and being able to express himself in that way. And I
Mhm.
can imagine that wasn't easy for him to tell his dad that, right? Especially because at the time he was going through a lot of stuff. And so I just really, really thought it was dope that he was not only able, but willing to share that with me. Because otherwise, how do we have the relationship that we're supposed to have if I don't know how to love him properly and without him telling me? So yeah, it was probably one of my most proud dad moments with him was just him having the courage to do that.
And it really should be a proud dad moment, because as a mom of little smaller kids, my oldest is 11 and my youngest is 8. And I often wonder this as well, like how do you get them to pinpoint their feelings, because at this age it's just like it's react. you know
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so you should be really proud, because that's a sign of maturity on both parties, I believe. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. It was
um
cool.
so talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're doing now. I know you have your hands in some different things here, but like how are you taking this story, this trauma, the past and transforming it into power and using it for power?
The way that I take the trauma / story from my past and use it is, number one, through my gym. It's called Beautifully Savage Boxing, and it's a boxing based group fitness studio where we remind people that they're worth fighting for. That's it. We're not here for weight loss. We're just here to remind you that no matter how you showed up, you're worth fighting for. And if that's the message that they get, then from there, they'll get the results because they'll realize I am worth fighting for, and they'll fight for themselves every day. So the gym is the number one place. Second place is through my executive coaching business. My main focus has been working with men. It's going through a little bit of a transition right now, but I just feel like, I don't want to go on a weird tangent, but I feel like a lot of men, especially my age demographic and right under, have sort of lost their way and have forgotten what it's like to stand up and be counted as great men, as leaders, as, protectors and providers, but also as, someone who is emotionally intelligent enough to love their family the right way and not, just pound on the desk and rule with an iron fist. And so that's my passion, is to breathe life into men. I do it through a program I created called Fit to Fight. And it is a 6-week boxing and personal development program. So every week they spend 2 hours with me. The first hour, I put them through a boxing workout. The second hour, we do personal development. I coach them up. I coach them up on faith, family, finances, fitness, fun. And then, week 1, we define like what we're fighting for. I also run that program for teens who have been justice impacted, as well as other teens, mainly boys. We're running our first girls program starting September 2nd. So I'm excited about that. It's also 6 weeks long, same program I created. And that's run through my nonprofit, which is called The Lotus Effect. And the purpose of that is to help people break out of the criminal justice system. Anyone that's justice impacted, my goal is to help them get out of there. But first, they have to remember that they're worth fighting for, so that they will fight to get out of there. Because hopelessness is one of the first things that creeps in when you get stuck in that system. I'd say the last two. One, I speak pretty often, so I get paid to come and share my story with people, not to edify myself, but hopefully to keep someone from going down the same path that I went down. And last is through my social media channels. I share there, and I hope that maybe one person somewhere sees something that helps them, whether it's, I want to go for a new job, or I'm going to give my relationship one more try, or if it's, as long as everything's okay. I want to, try to be better at this, or I'm going to not give up on myself at this. Like, that's the only reason I share, not, to say like, hey, I'm some great overcomer, look at all the things I overcame, but to say whatever you're going through, you can overcome that too. And you can come out of it as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other. Eventually the road will rise up to meet you.
And your story, so what I saw on your social media was video footage of your story, and then you're talking. These videos, what do you send these out to when you do speaking engagements? Do you show them at the beginning of, and then you show them on social media as well?
Yeah, so usually send it beforehand, and then sometimes they'll ask me to do it right before I speak, or I'll send it out and they'll watch it so that it gives people some context as to who's coming to speak. The video was actually done in partnership with a company called Lululemon and another company called Huckberry. So they paid for the video. Breakwater Studios actually did the video. Those guys are incredible. They won an Academy Award last year, so shout out to Breakwater Studios. They're nominated for another one this year. They were nominated the year before, so I kind of always get to have that little like bit of bragging rights. Like, those guys won an Academy Award. That's all I'm saying. But that's really where I share. And that video has been really impactful. It's been so cool. I mean, I get messages from Africa, from Spain, from Canada, from New York. And people were like, oh my gosh, I loved your video. That's why I started following. And it's just really, really a huge blessing to think that you can use your story, your journey, your knockdown to inspire people that you're probably never going to see, to plant trees that you're never going to see.
And it gives people hope. So the thing is, people, like you said, hopelessness is it's a bad like path to go down. And I can only imagine how hopeless it becomes in this in when you're in the system, in a prison system. But even we live in a culture where hopelessness is it's
Yeah.
everywhere. And I
Hmm.
feel like the more people can see and experience and feel stories of like yours, that they know, okay, this guy did it. If this guy did it,
Hmm.
why can't I? If this guy
Yep.
rose above it, I'm listening to him talk. He's super impactful. He's positive in his the way he thinks. If he can do it, why can't I? And that's the real
Hmm.
question that I hope people ask themselves, because I hopelessness is not a it's not a place you want to live.
No, no, no. Hopelessness is, I mean, it's the reason people end things, whether it's a job, a relationship, their life, like hopelessness. I have no hope that this can get better. So this is my alternative. It's like the young man from Euphoria, Angus Cloud, ended his life because his dad died, and he just couldn't deal with that.
Hmm.
It's a young man that had the world at his fingertips. Just
Yeah.
lost hope.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really ugly thing. And I hope that people can just be inspired to know. And I don't really know kind of what your religious views are, but like, if you're here, you have a purpose. You have,
Amen.
I like to say God's not done with you because you're still here.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and to take matters into our own hands and to end things. I've been in the place where I've considered suicide, and I was in a place of
Yeah.
hopelessness. And,
Yep.
it's just a really ugly place to be. And, as long as you still have breath in your lungs, there's something here for you to do. And if
Yeah.
everyone, I had this epiphany probably a couple years ago. It was right around the time I turned 40. And I was like, you know, what happens really realistically? I'm like halfway over my life. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how much further do you live past, in this day and age? And I'm like, what happens if I take this second half of my life and I just run towards what it is God has for me to do on this earth with no
Mm-hmm.
fear about what people are going to think? And we still struggle with those things as humans. Like, I still struggle with those things. What are people going to think of me, or what are they going to say about me? But what happens if I just remind myself constantly, like, stop caring? You have a goal, you have a purpose, you have
Yeah.
something that you're pursuing. You cannot stop until it's done. Your work here's not done until it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So, I get cold chills even thinking about it.
If you think about it, and I tell my boys this when I coach them, I said, God don't make mistakes. There are no accidental humans.
Mm.
And if you understand biology, and we're not going to get too deep into that because I don't know if there's kids on this podcast, but there was like at one point in time, your parents met and fell in love. And there was an actual death race of about 1 trillion potential humans racing to become you. And what science has further learned is that it's not just an accident. The female, the egg, chooses the partner. You were chosen at conception. Therefore, you are not an accident. Therefore, your life has purpose, but it's up to you to find out what that purpose is. So, at conception, you were chosen and you were a champion. You won the race and you were chosen. Therefore, your life cannot be devoid of purpose. One of the challenges that I believe as a society we have is that, again, going back to it, which is why I coach young men, we have so many people that have no purpose, specifically men. They have no purpose other than existing or being cool or getting likes or followers, but they have no real purpose. And that's when a society starts to collapse, is when people don't have any purpose other than existing.
What role do you think, and I know we can go down like a whole nother rabbit hole with this, but I am curious to know, what role do you think the the, I've been listening to some different things about the attack on genders and the attack on
Mhm,
masculinity and femininity,
mhm,
and
mhm.
but we'll specifically talk about masculinity because I do think there's an attack on men and
Yeah.
on masculinity. And it burdens me. Like I feel, because as women, I feel like we need men. We're made to, you know, be one. So anyway, when we think of that, like how what role do you think masculinity really plays in these issues and this hopelessness and the purpose that men are seeking but just can't find?
That's such a great question. And without going like too deep, because we'll be on here for another 2 hours. I do think that there was a push for a while, and God bless it. I'm a girl dad. I've got them where it was like, well, equality, and that matters. But I think at a certain point, it became like at the expense of, versus to me, it's like, well, this is what it should look like, right? Like, and some are going to be here on some things, some will be here on some things. So it's never actually really like this, right? But I felt like at a certain point, which is why I started coaching men, I was like, there's so many people sounding the trumpet for women. I mean, I'm a business owner. I go online, I look for grants, and there's 85 for women-owned businesses. There's literally never a grant that is just for male-owned businesses. And I understand, all the socioeconomic stuff. I get it. And at the same time, I'm like, we have done a really good job of empowering our women, and we have amazing women who are CEOs and they're bosses in every part of their life. But I just think at a certain point, a lot of men took the message as, well, just move to the side. Like, you're good over there. You guys kind of had your time. And so that's why I said earlier, I just don't think that men want to stand up and be counted anymore. I don't think that they want to stand up and be great. I think that they are more concerned with like just existing and getting through this thing. And hopefully I put enough money into my savings and my insurance that when I die, my kids can maybe like go to college. But people aren't, captains of industry anymore. They're not running into danger anymore. Now when men see women being assaulted on the street, or they take out their phone and record. They don't rush in to help. And so I think that that's what I'm trying to impart to the men and young men that I work with is like, no, you should be the kind of man that runs to help. Your phone should not come out of your pocket when someone is being hurt. You should be the first person to run in and help. Be the kind of person that can stand up for other people. Be the kind of person that can stand up for yourself. Be the kind of person that whatever your family needs, you are the man that's going to provide that for them, right? Become the bag, right? Everyone's trying to get the bag. I'm like, no, become the bag. So I just think that at a certain point, men were asked to not be masculine and they said, okay. Some of them just said, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And then that permeated, right? And now you have those men are raising boys. Some of those boys are raising boys. And it just became the other problem. And you and I both know this is this. Like, I love my son. My son's never grown up in a world that this didn't exist, where he didn't have information at his fingertips within a minute, where him and his friends could say anything to anybody on the phone with no negative repercussion. Like, so we've kind of taken away there's consequences and a ripple effect for our actions. So people just act with impunity however they want to act. And I do believe what you said. There's an attack on gender. There's an attack on like just traditional family values. And I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. That's for another episode. But all of that plays into what we see now. And it's why I say it all the time to my boys. I'm like, men are soft. If you ask me, most men I meet are soft. When I see them, I think I see food. Rarely do I see an equal. I usually see food when I look at other men. But the ones that I see as equals, they're in my circle. You know what I mean? And so I just think how we combat that, that's why I teach boxing. That's why I teach men to stay dangerous, not in a be aggressive way, but just in a, I think one of the greatest compliments I've ever received in my life, I'm going to leave you with this on masculinity. Every woman that I've ever dated in my life has always said one and the same thing. I know no matter where I go with you, I feel safe. And I've never felt that way before. And I just don't think a lot of men want to step up and be the person that makes sure that everyone feels safe around them. So Yeah, we could have a whole other lengthy conversation about
Yeah.
that, and we'll both probably lose 10,000 followers, and it's fine.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. You spoke to a lot of amazing things, and I feel like it's heartfelt, and I feel like people will hear that when they listen to this too. That it's extremely heartfelt because we are raising a generation of kids, and we need to teach them how to be functioning in society, but on how to embrace what they have and their gifts and their purpose. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it's long, so I was listening to it yesterday and today, and it was with Andrew Tate and Candace Owens, and phenomenal episode. It was super long though, but he says this in there. He says men are very simple to please. Make him feel important and make him look important. And I feel like that as the roles get blurred, there, where society will tell a man to not be masculine or to ignore these things or to, you know, and then there's also this push of like women empowerment, and I'm all about women empowerment. I love it. But again, it goes both ways. At what point does that become too far to the point of, I don't need a man, and we hear
Hmm.
this and, but it's like, we do. We need men. And I needed my dad when I grew up. I need
Yeah.
men role models in my life. And I never ever want to come across as like an attack on men whatsoever. I've had some people tell me that sometimes I come across like that in my podcast. And I definitely never want to come across like that because I feel like it goes both ways. And women
Yeah.
too, we have to stand up and say, embrace the fact that, I am a woman. I'm not as strong as a man. I'm not a protector. I am the empathetic, like heartfelt, like mother that's nurturing and loving and kind. And when I start, when I start suppressing those things to become masculine, it it doesn't work, and I've seen this with, I'm a single mom and living with my kids. It's like I see the importance of them they have a relationship with their father, and they see him often, but it's still not the same as being in a
Mhm.
home where they're,
Yeah. Yeah.
conjoined. But we make the best of what we have, and
Yeah. Amen.
but we just see those little things. And I just
Yeah.
I know that I don't want to take this in the opposite direction either, so we'll get back on track here. Um, but I know that you've spoke a lot about the different things that you're doing, and to really empower men and boys, and to grow up in a culture that is very difficult. We live in a
Mhm.
difficult culture. Um, what else, if someone were listening to us today talk, and let's just say they are in a sense of hopelessness, and they are struggling with all different types of things, not just masculinity, but with all different types of things, and they're looking for these toxic behaviors like selling drugs or like pornography or like all these different toxic things that they could go down. What advice would you give them, or where would you tell them to go with some of these issues?
That is a fantastic question. The first advice I would give them is to sit down and figure out why they were born,
Mm.
right? You've got two important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you figure out why you were born. And so if you're a young person, that could simply mean sit down. This is an exercise I have my boys do. Sit down and we're just going to brainstorm for 5 minutes. Take your pen and write everything that you love to do, like the things that when you do them, you smile, you laugh. Write them all down. I don't care what it is. Write it down. Dancing, playing football, hiking, it doesn't matter. Write them all down. Somewhere in there is your purpose. Somewhere in there is your purpose. The things that make your heart smile and make your heart sing, somewhere in there is your purpose. If it's an older person, one thing I ask my men is, let's go back to being 9 years old and playing in the backyard. Who were you? What did you dream about? And how old were you when you gave up on that dream? Because somewhere in there is also your purpose. Oh, I loved baseball, but everyone told me it wasn't realistic. And well, somewhere in there is your purpose. Maybe you're not going to make it to the major leagues because that ship may have passed. But what if you started a baseball podcast or a TikTok channel, or somewhere in there is your purpose? The vices are always going to be easier, and they only help for a very short period of time. And this is coming from a man who women used to be my vice. That was how I dealt with my insecurities. That's how I dealt with the fact that I didn't have a father in my life. And so I knew that everyone was going to leave me. So that was how I made myself feel good about myself. And then I realized that I never actually felt good about myself. I always felt less than. So not giving into vices actually makes you stronger mentally. It's about giving up what you want now for who you actually want to be in this life. Not giving into vices like porn and drugs and all those things puts you in the top probably 5% of human beings. And that's rare air to be in. That's Kobe Bryant air. That's Michael Jordan air. That's LeBron James air. But at the end of the day, for both groups, it's as simple as this. Sit down and ask yourself if all the decisions that you make every single day are in alignment with the human being that you want to be seen as. It's that simple. You say you want to lose 30 pounds? I saw you at Wendy's yesterday and you weren't eating a salad. So is that decision in alignment with where you're trying to go? You say you want to save money? I saw you shopping on your Instagram story. So is that in alignment? So sometimes it's just that simple. Are the decisions that I'm making in alignment with the person that I say I want to be, with the man that I say I want to be? Because if they're not, then I probably need to get rid of them.
Wow, that is profound, and that's really awesome. I could go on talking to you all day because I truly I just, there's something about the aura of a positive person and someone who's been through things. There's so many more questions I'd love to ask, but for sake of time, I won't.
Yeah.
But wow, Joe, like you're doing amazing things, and I just hope you continue to go full force into this purpose and doing all the things that you're doing. I truly believe that you will impact greatly more people than you probably could ever know or expect. You may not ever know that on this side of heaven, but maybe, we never know who we're impacting, and, and then you never know who you're impacting you impact one person and they go impact 10, but it's an indirect result of who you impacted. So,
I mean, just to your point real quick, last December, I was in Brooklyn, New York, which is 2 time zones away from where I live, walking down the street to get myself some lunch. And I hear someone yelling, "Hey, stuff your dad should have taught you. Stuff your dad should have taught you." And he's running over to me with his friend. And he's like, "This is the guy I was telling you about from Instagram. This is him." And I was just like, how freaking cool is that? How cool is that? Like you said, you're touching people's lives with your show, with the work you do, that you may never ever meet, but maybe one day you're going to be walking down the street in LA and someone's going to run up on you and be like, "I love your podcast. It changed my life." So, but the only way we can do that is if we keep sharing our gift with the world.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Find a gift and then share it. Run after it with everything.
That's
so
it.
True. Well, Joe, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for spending this last, hour or so with me. And I truly think you bring a wealth of knowledge and value to anyone who listens to you. And we'll link up, if it's okay with you, in the show notes, we'll link up your video, because I would love for people to see that and see the power behind that as well. Yep. And you just keep doing what you're doing.
You too. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our Transformation Project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.